My fiancée said she had registered her marriage with that guy to save his mother. She told me not to make a scene and said it was only a piece of paper. I nodded and poured her a glass of water. Great, you helped me dodge a bullet early. She froze. That guy clutched the marriage certificate, the smugness in his eyes impossible to hide. I smiled at him and said, since it's only a piece of paper, then she's coming home with me tonight. You don't mind, do you? Chapter 1. The air conditioning in the cafe was turned too low. A layer of moisture had formed on the side of the glass, sliding down the surface before dripping onto the back of my hand. I lowered my eyes and glanced at it, but I didn't wipe it away. Across from me, Willow pushed a red booklet to the center of the table. Her fingertips pressed against the cover. Her nails were neatly rounded, and she was still wearing the bracelet I had given her last month. She said, George, Makoto and I registered our marriage. My hand froze halfway with the cup in it. The bottom of the cup tapped against the table, sending ripples across the water. Makoto sat beside her. His white shirt had been washed until it looked old. His shoulders drooped slightly, and he was clutching a tissue in his hand. The corners of his eyes slanted downward, making him look as if a single gust of wind could knock him over. But when his gaze slid from the red booklet to my face, the corner of his mouth lifted ever so slightly. I thought to myself, wow, he really brought my fiancé here like he was claiming a trophy in front of me. I set the cup down steadily and asked, when did this happen? Willow drew in a breath and answered, this morning. You registered your marriage in the morning and told me in the afternoon. Very efficient. She frowned and said, don't be sarcastic. Makoto's mother needs surgery. The hospital's caregiver consent forms and the special assistance application both require family member status. He had no other choice. Makoto immediately lowered his head and said, Willow, don't argue with George because of me. I shouldn't have dragged you two into this in the first place. As he spoke, he moved to stand up. The chair legs scraped against the tile floor. Willow reached out and pressed down on the back of his hand. Sit down. I looked at that hand and laughed. Willow's face tightened. What are you laughing at? I'm laughing at how good you are at saving people. Anger smoldered in her eyes as she said, George, a life is at stake. Can marriage be used to save someone too? It's just a formality. Registering a marriage is a formality. A marriage certificate is just a piece of paper. Spousal status is just helping out. Willow, even your family's legal team would applaud after hearing that. She put the red booklet back into her bag, and her voice hardened. Can't you have a little empathy? You have everything. Makoto has nothing. Makoto immediately said, George, I really wasn't trying to take anything from you. Once my mother gets through this, I'll divorce Willow. I looked at him. Of course you weren't trying to take anything. You only turned her into your wife. Makoto's fingers clenched at once, crushing the tissue into a ball. Willow stepped in front of him and said, I did it willingly. How generous of you. She stared at me and said, George, if you love me, you should trust me. I leaned back in my chair. The leather seat made a soft sound, and the bitterness of the coffee sank from the root of my tongue down my throat. I had wanted to ask her, our engagement invitations have already been finalized. Before you registered your marriage, did you think about me even once? But when the words reached my lips, I swallowed them back. There was no need. She had handed me the knife, then asked me if it hurt. Someone like that didn't deserve to hear the answer. I picked up my phone and sent my father a message. Pause all materials related to the Liu family marriage alliance. I'll send you the reason later. After sending it, I looked up at Willow and said, fine, I understand. Willow Liu froze. What did you say? I smiled and repeated. I said, I understand. Makoto also froze for a second. The smugness in his eyes got stuck there. I picked up the cup and took a sip. The ice water slid down my throat, leaving my stomach cold and tight. It's to save someone. I support that. Willow let out a breath of relief, but her fingers still didn't leave the back of Makoto's hand. I looked at that hand, my voice even calmer. Since it's only a formality, then our original relationship doesn't need to change either. She frowned. What do you mean? I stood up, walked to her side, and bent down to pick up her bag. With my other hand resting on the back of her chair, I stood very close to her. Willow's breath caught. Makoto jerked his head up. George, what are you doing? I tilted my head and looked at him. Taking my girlfriend home. Makoto's face turned a shade paler. She is legally my wife now. I nodded. Didn't you just say it was only a formality? His lips moved, but no words came out. I picked up Willow's coat and draped it over her shoulders. My knuckles brushed against the side of her neck. Her body stiffened, and her fingers instinctively gripped the edge of the table. I asked her quietly, coming? Willow wanted to refuse, but when the words reached her lips, she glanced at Makoto. In the end, she stood up. Makoto shot to his feet as well. Willow, my mom still needs you to go over tonight. I smiled and spun my car key around my finger. Mr. Ito, your husband, you go stay. His eyes immediately reddened. I'm afraid I won't be able to handle it alone. Then learn. I led Willow to the door, then looked back at him. Someone else's wife, I'll toy with her right in front of him. Since you think that piece of paper doesn't matter, Don't watch so closely. Chapter 2. The cafe went quiet for a few seconds. At the next table, the spoon in a girl's hand tapped against the rim of her cup with a crisp ding. Makoto's face went from pale to livid. His fingers pressed hard against the tabletop. Willow suddenly tugged at my sleeve and said, "George, don't make it sound so ugly." I lowered my head and looked at her. Ugly. Her lips parted slightly. I buttoned her coat for her, my fingertips stopping on the second button. I pressed it gently and said, "What you two did was much uglier than anything I said." The moment the car door closed, Willow finally exploded. "George, what did you mean back there? Did you really have to humiliate Makoto in front of him?" I started the car. The windshield wipers swept across the glass, and the streetlights stretched into long streaks through the rain. I humiliated him. His mother is still in the hospital, and you said that to him. I looked ahead and said, "When you registered your marriage, did you ever think about how you were going to tell me?" She fell silent for a few seconds. Then her tone softened. "I was afraid you wouldn't agree, so you did it first and told me afterward. I had no other choice." Willow, there were plenty of choices. Find a lawyer, find a caregiver, find a hospital social worker, find a foundation, find your parents, find me. I stepped on the brake. The red light glowed against the car window, casting a red layer over her face. "But you just had to choose marriage registration." Her throat moved slightly. "Makoto didn't want to owe you anything." I laughed. "So he can owe you a marriage instead." She turned her face away, her fingertips gripping the edge of the seat belt. Her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID but didn't answer. I caught a glimpse of the screen. "Makoto." The call stopped, and a message popped up right after. Makoto wrote, "Willow, I'm fine. Don't worry about me. George is probably just hurting too much." Then another one. "If he really can't accept it, then stay with him. I can be at the hospital alone." Willow held the phone, wanting to reply, but then she stopped. I let out a laugh. "Go on, reply." She bit her lip. "Don't be like this." "Like what?" "Don't use that tone." I turned on the signal, and the car drove into the garage beneath my apartment building. She froze and asked, "Why did you bring me here? Didn't you say our relationship didn't have to change?" The garage light swept over the roof of the car one section at a time. The air smelled of damp concrete. The tires rolled over puddles on the ground with soft, faint sounds. Willow sat up straight and said, "George, today isn't a good time for me." I parked the car, unbuckled my seat belt, and leaned toward her. Her back pressed against the seat, and her breath caught. I tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. My fingertip brushed against the curve of her ear, and her hand suddenly grabbed my wrist. "What are you doing? What are you afraid of?" Her eyes grew unsettled. "Makoto's status is special now." I laughed. "Special how? Because of a piece of paper?" Her expression changed. I pulled back and opened the car door. "Get out." She didn't move. "George, are you trying to get back at me?" I held the car door and looked at her. "Yes." She froze. I had said it too bluntly, and for a moment, she had no words. I smiled and added, "You already gave marriage away. Am I not even allowed to collect a little interest?" Her eyes reddened. "You weren't like this before. You also weren't someone else's wife before." Chapter 3. Her shoulders trembled, and her phone rang again. I reached out and took her phone. She tried to snatch it back, but I lifted my hand higher. She lunged forward, her fingertips brushing against my collar, and nearly crashed straight into my arms. I lowered my head and looked at her. She stopped, her breathing quickening for a few beats. The car was cramped. The scent of perfume, rain, and leather pressed together in the enclosed space. Her hand rested against my chest. She wanted to push me away, but she didn't immediately use any force. I asked in a low voice, "Should I answer it?" She swallowed and ordered, "Give it back." I pressed answer and turned on speaker. Makoto's voice came through the phone, choked with tears. "Willow, where are you? My mom just woke up. She keeps calling your name." Willow was about to speak, but I pressed my fingers against her lips. She glared at me, her breath falling against my knuckles. I spoke into the phone. "She's with me." The other end went silent. Makoto's voice tightened. "George, let Willow answer the phone. She's not available." Willow grabbed my hand and tried to pull it away, but I didn't let go. Makoto grew anxious. "Don't do anything reckless. She has already registered her marriage with me." I laughed. "Mr. Ito, you're contradicting yourself." "What? If you acknowledge this marriage, then she's your wife. Asking her to come keep her ex-boyfriend company doesn't seem appropriate." His breathing grew uneven. "And if you don't acknowledge it, then stop caring where she is right now." Willow finally pulled my hand down and shouted, "George." I handed her the phone. She took it, but she didn't explain anything to Makoto. She only said, "I'll go to the hospital later." Makoto lowered his voice. "Are you staying at his place tonight?" Willow glanced at me. I leaned against the car door and raised an eyebrow. She tightened her grip on the phone. "We're just going to talk things through," Makoto said. "But I'm your husband." I laughed and cut in. "If you're her husband, go pay the hospital bills. Don't just sit there making phone calls." A burst of noise came from the other end, as if Makoto had knocked something over. Willow hung up and turned to look at me. That's enough. Not enough. I leaned close to her ear and softened my voice. Willow, he just got the title, and he's already trying to control where you go. Do you see it now? Her lips turned pale, but she said nothing. I pulled back and opened the car door for her. Let's go upstairs. We can talk about how much that piece of paper is worth. The lights in my living room weren't fully turned on. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the rain slanted down, leaving streams of water across the glass. Willow sat on the edge of the sofa, her hands clasped together. The bracelet hung beside her wrist bone, swaying slightly. When I bought that bracelet, she said she would always wear it. Now, looking at it only made my eyes sting. I took 2 bottles of water from the fridge and tossed one to her. She didn't catch it properly. The bottle rolled to her feet and bumped against the leg of the coffee table. George, let's not do this. Do what? You know Makoto and I only did this because it was an emergency. I sat across from her and asked, then tell me, what kind of emergency was so urgent that you had to register a marriage? She looked up and said, his mother needed to apply for family hardship assistance under a spouse's status. They needed proof of immediate family status, and Makoto doesn't have any close relatives. For hospital surgery consent, an adult child can sign. She froze for a moment, then said, but he was afraid of taking responsibility. I laughed. So because he was afraid of taking responsibility, he found you to take it as his wife? Her eyes flickered. I continued, who told you about the required documents for the special assistance application? Makoto, did you read the actual policy yourself? She said nothing. Did you check his mother's insurance status? Her fingers clenched. Did you ask who he owed money to? She lifted her eyes. You think he lied to me? I spread my hands. I think he used your brain as extra padding for his mother's hospital bed. Chapter 4. She shot to her feet and shouted, George. I stood up too and walked right up to her. Why are you yelling at me? You're the one who got married. You're the one who lied to our families. You're the one who ruined our engagement plans. Tears shimmered in her eyes as she said, I didn't mean to ruin anything. Whether you meant to or not doesn't change the result. I picked up the sample engagement invitation from the coffee table and threw it in front of her. The pages scattered open, the gold-stamped words giving off a cold gleam under the light. Willow bent down to pick them up, her hands trembling slightly. I looked at her and said, our 2 families are supposed to sign the partnership agreement next week. Once the news that you're already married reaches my father, how do you think the Liu family is going to explain it? Her expression changed at once. I can divorce Makoto as soon as possible. The marriage registration record won't disappear. Her voice dropped. George, I really didn't think that far. Right, you were too busy playing savior. The words landed hard, and something in her eyes finally cracked. Her phone rang again. When she saw Makoto's name, she rejected the call outright. The next second, Makoto sent a photo, a hospital corridor, and 4 stand, dim yellow lights. He was sitting on a bench, one part of his sleeve soaked wet. The caption read, I don't blame anyone. I only blame myself for being useless. Willow stared at the screen, conflict spreading across her face. I reached out and took the phone. She tried to grab it, but I lifted it high and caught her wrist with my other hand. She crashed into my arms. Our clothes brushed together, and our breaths tangled in the air. George, stop messing around. I'm messing around. I lowered my head and looked at her. Your husband is sending late-night selfies, begging for comfort, and you're standing in my living room saying I'm the one messing around. She shoved me hard. Don't call him that. I laughed. Legal husband. Am I wrong? She gritted her teeth. Do you have to hurt me like this? Not just that. I let go of her and called Makoto. Willow panicked and lunged at me. I pressed down on her shoulder and pushed her back onto the sofa. The call connected. Makoto's voice was hoarse. Willow. I said. It's me. His breathing stopped for a second. George, give her phone back to her. She's in the shower. Willow's eyes widened, and she reached out to cover my mouth. I tilted my head away. Her hand brushed past my jaw, her fingertips trembling. Makoto's voice sharpened. What did you say? I slowly smiled. Didn't you say it was only a piece of paper? Don't get worked up. There was a loud bang on the other end, as if a chair had fallen over. Makoto lowered his voice and said, George, don't go too far. You two opened that door first. I hung up and tossed the phone back onto the sofa. Willow was so angry her chest rose and fell. You did that on purpose. Yeah, you're trying to make him break down. He's supposed to be the vulnerable one, isn't he? I just want to see how vulnerable he can really get. She grabbed her bag and headed for the door. I didn't stop her. I only said, go back now, and he'll hold you while crying. He'll say he shouldn't be alive. He'll make you feel like the whole world is bullying him. Her steps stopped. I walked to the entryway and opened the door. Go on, savior. She stood by the door, her hand gripping the handle. She wanted to leave, but she didn't take that step. The hallway light fell across her face, making it look drained of color. I said, Willow, if you step out tonight, I'll send my father the proof that you're married. The marriage alliance, the partnership, the engagement, all of it stops. She turned to look at me. Are you threatening me? It's not a threat. It's a notice. Her tears finally fell, landing on the back of her hand. I closed the door and spoke coldly. Now sit back down and tell me every single thing Makoto said to you, from the very beginning. Chapter 5. The next morning, the school forum blew up. A post title was pinned on the homepage. The screenshot showed Willow and me entering my apartment building from behind. The caption was vicious. The young master of the Wang family bullies a poor student. Knowing the other guy's mother is seriously ill, he still forcibly takes away his wife. The replies kept piling up page after page. Some people called me cold-blooded. Some called Willow fickle and shameless. Others posted photos of Makoto in the hospital, saying he had stayed awake all night, leaning against the corridor wall as he waited for his wife to come back. I sat by the cafeteria window, biting into a steamed bun, laughing as I read. People around me kept sneaking glances at me. Even the sound of chopsticks touching bowls grew quieter. My buddy David sat down across from me and asked, "You can still eat?" I pushed my phone toward him. It's written pretty well. Lots of emotion. David cursed under his breath. Makoto posted this. Most likely not him. He's not that stupid. David glanced around and asked, "Then who?" I picked up a piece of fried egg and said, "His roommate, or one of those sympathy stands he found." The moment I finished speaking, Willow rushed into the cafeteria. She clearly hadn't slept well last night. There were dark shadows under her eyes, and her hair was tied back tightly. She slapped her phone down in front of me. "Did you see the forum?" "I saw it. Why aren't you clarifying things?" I looked up and asked, "Clarify what?" "Clarify that you really did register your marriage with him, and you really did come home with me." She choked on her words. The surrounding area fell silent. Makoto walked in from the entrance, 2 classmates following beside him. His face was pale. He was carrying a hospital payment folder in his hand, and his shoulders drooped as he walked. Yet every step still brought him straight toward us. Willow wanted to go over to him, but I reached out and caught her wrist. She struggled once and snapped, "George, let go." I didn't release her. "Sit down." Makoto stopped in front of the table, his voice so light it seemed to drift. "George, I didn't post the thing on the forum. Don't blame Willow." I laughed. "You're pretty good at assigning responsibility." He lowered his eyes and continued, "I know you look down on me, but my mom really needs someone to take care of her. I can't lose Willow." People around us started whispering. I swallowed the steamed bun and wiped my hands with a napkin. "Makoto, has your mother's hospital deposit been paid today?" He froze. "What? As her husband, you should know the family finances, right?" Makoto's expression tightened. "I'm trying to figure something out, and that something is making Willow pay for you." Willow frowned and said, "I lent him the money willingly." I turned to look at her. "Where's the IOU?" She went silent. I looked back at Makoto and asked, "No IOU means it's not a loan. So is it marital living expense?" Panic flashed through Makoto's eyes. "I'll pay her back." I picked up my phone and went on. "Then write an IOU now. 376,000. Hospital deposit, examination fees, caregiver fees, notarization fees for the assistant's documents. Write every single item down." Makoto's lips turned pale. "George, why do you have to force me in public? When you people posted on the forum, didn't you also enjoy making things public?" One of the classmates beside him spoke up. "George, his mother is seriously ill. Just because you have money doesn't mean you can bully people like this." I smiled at him. "What's your name?" He froze for a second before saying, "Martin." "Fine, Martin. Since you're so loyal, why don't you act as the guarantor for this IOU?" He immediately shut up. A few quiet laughs sounded around the cafeteria. Makoto's hands started to tremble. I took a printed template out of my bag, slapped it onto the table, and handed him a pen. "Aren't you her husband? A husband has to take responsibility. Don't just enjoy the title." Makoto didn't take the pen. His eyes slowly reddened. "Willow, I really didn't think George would humiliate me like this." Willow looked at me, then at Makoto. In the past, she definitely would have rushed to protect him at once. This time, she only said, "Makoto, the money really should be written down clearly." Makoto froze completely. I smiled in satisfaction. See, the savior's halo was starting to flicker. Makoto lowered his head, his fingers gripping the payment folder so tightly that the paper bag split open. He took the pen. When he reached the amount, the pen tip scratched through the paper. I leaned down and looked at him. "Don't shake, legal husband." He suddenly looked up, and a trace of hatred finally leaked from his eyes. I winked at him. "Don't be scared. I'm just helping you get into character." Chapter 6. After the IOU was written, the forum didn't calm down. Instead, it got even hotter. A new post claimed that I had forced the family of a seriously ill patient to sell themselves to pay off a debt, that Willow was being controlled by me, and that Makoto was enduring humiliation for his mother's sake. I opened the comments and saw rows of people lining up to curse me out. David was so angry he wanted to find someone to trace the posting account. I stopped him. Don't rush. Don't rush. Your reputation is almost completely ruined. A little ruined is good. He looked at me. Are you insane? I put my phone into my pocket. A little. That afternoon, Willow asked me to go to the hospital. She said Makoto's mother wanted to see her. I agreed. The ward was on the 13th floor of the inpatient building. The smell of disinfectant drilled into my nose. Family members crowded around the elevator entrance. Plastic bags rustled, and a wheelchair rolled across the floor with a squeak. Makoto stood at the door of the ward. When he saw me, his expression clearly stiffened. George came too. I lifted the fruit basket in my hand. I'm here to visit the mother-in-law. His face turned livid. Don't talk nonsense. You and Willow are legally married. Of course your mother counts as her mother-in-law. The two caregivers beside us looked over. Makoto lowered his voice. My mother is in poor health. Don't upset her. I nodded. Then don't upset me. Willow frowned. George. I stuffed the fruit basket into her hands and let her go in. The woman on the hospital bed had a waxy yellow complexion. There was an 4 needle in her wrist, and examination reports hung by the head of the bed. The moment she saw Willow, she reached out. Willow, you've worked so hard. I've dragged you down. Willow walked over and supported her. Auntie, please don't say that. The woman's tears fell at once. Makoto has had such a hard life. Meeting you is his blessing. I stood at the foot of the bed and watched as Makoto's mother quietly moved her other hand toward the side of the pillow, trying to stuff a payment slip under the blanket. I smiled. Auntie, let me see that payment slip. Makoto's mother froze. Makoto immediately stepped in front of her. George, why are you checking that? To see exactly how miserable you all are. The ward fell silent. Willow looked at Makoto and said, let him see it. Makoto didn't move. I reached out, but Makoto's mother clutched the slip tightly, her knuckles turning white. One of the caregivers whispered from the side, wasn't part of that already reimbursed yesterday? Makoto suddenly turned to look at her. The caregiver was so frightened that she shut her mouth. I raised an eyebrow. Reimbursed? Makoto's mother started coughing. I don't know. Makoto handled everything. Makoto held her up, his voice tight. Mom, don't talk. I took out my phone and photographed the information card at the head of the bed. Makoto rushed over to block me. You can't photograph a patient's private information. I put my phone away. Fine, I won't. He let out a breath of relief. I looked at Willow and said, go to the billing office and check it yourself, using your family member status. She froze. Makoto's expression changed. Willow, there's no need. George just doesn't trust me. I smiled. That's right. I don't trust you. Willow stood where she was, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. Makoto's voice turned hoarse. Willow, can I not even trust you anymore? She looked at him as if those words had stabbed into her. I didn't try to persuade her. I only walked to her side, took her hand, and gently squeezed her palm with my fingertips. Whether you go or not is your choice. Makoto stared at our hands, his eyes reddening. Willow tried to pull away, but she didn't manage to. I leaned close to her ear and lowered my voice. The harder he tries to stop you, the more there is to hide. Her breathing grew uneven. A few seconds later, she pulled her hand out of mine and turned toward the billing office. Makoto tried to follow her, but I stepped in front of him. At last, he tore away that soft, pitiful mask and said in a low voice, George, are you trying to drive someone to death? I smiled. Would you really dare to die? His jaw clenched tight. I patted him on the shoulder and said, don't rush. The game has only just begun. Chapter 7. The lights at the billing office window were a harsh, pale white. Voices were separated by the glass, and the printer spat out paper, the sound striking my eardrums again and again. Willow used her ID and marriage certificate to check the payment details. At first, she stood very straight. By the time she reached the 3rd page, her shoulders slowly sank. I didn't move closer. I let her read it herself. She returned to the hallway with the papers in her hand, her face almost drained of color. Makoto went up to her. Willow, listen to me explain. She handed him the payment details and asked, your mother has employee medical insurance, and part of the serious illness assistance has already been approved. Why did you tell me everything had to be paid out of pocket? Makoto's eyes flickered. I was afraid it wouldn't be enough later. You said the surgery deposit was short by $400,000. The doctor said it might cost more. The details show that $120,000 was refunded yesterday. Makoto's throat moved. I was going to use it to repay my debts. Otherwise, the debt collectors would come to the hospital and cause trouble. The papers in Willow's hand were crushed in her grip. Why didn't you tell me you owed money? Makoto's tears fell quickly. I was afraid you'd look down on me. I really had no other way. My mom got sick. My dad ran away, and I couldn't carry all of it alone. He reached for her hand. Willow wanted to dodge him, but then she stopped, leaning against the wall. I saw that moment of hesitation and smiled. Makoto seized the chance, his voice becoming even softer. Willow, you're all I have. I spoke up. You also have a legal marriage. His gaze sharpened. George, can you stop interrupting? No. I walked over, took the payment details from Willow's hand, and glanced through them. 120,000 was refunded. Where did it go? Makoto said nothing. I told Willow to check the account. She hesitated. That involves his privacy. I laughed out loud. You already married him, and now you're talking about privacy. Her face turned pale. Makoto immediately said, Willow, don't let him turn you against me. I slapped the payment details against Makoto's chest. I'll give you two choices. Either you say it yourself, or I'll have a lawyer go through the proper channels to investigate. He gritted his teeth. On what grounds? On the grounds that you owe Willow 376,000. You wrote the IOU this morning. Makoto's lips trembled. At the other end of the hallway, Makoto's mother came out while holding onto the wall. Her face still looked sickly, but her shout was sharp. Stop forcing my son. Just because you're rich, does that mean you can trample poor people into the ground? Several family members gathered around. Makoto's mother clutched her chest and started sliding downward. Makoto quickly supported her. Mom. Someone in the crowd raised a phone. Willow's expression changed, and she shouted, Don't record. Makoto's mother cried out, Willow, if you regret this, then leave. I won't drag you down. But you can't let an outsider humiliate Makoto like this. As soon as she said that, everyone's gaze fell on me. I slowly raised my phone. Makoto was startled. What are you doing? I pressed play. From the recording, the caregiver's words in the ward came through clearly. Wasn't part of that already reimbursed yesterday? Then came Makoto's lowered voice. Mom, don't talk. The hallway went silent. Makoto's mother's crying got stuck in her throat. I turned off the recording and smiled at the onlookers. Keep recording. Don't stop. The auntie who had raised her phone earlier silently lowered it. Willow looked at Makoto, her voice very soft. How many more things have you lied to me about? Makoto's eyes were completely red. He suddenly turned to me. You forced me into this. If you hadn't kept targeting me, why would I be so afraid? I clapped. The sound was crisp and piercing in the hallway. Nice blame shifting. I walked closer and looked down at him. Too bad you missed your target. Makoto's tears hung from his chin, and his whole body was shaking badly. I smiled and said, Next time you try to fight back, remember to bring something real. Chapter 8. Makoto didn't disappoint me. 2 days later, he released screenshots of a chat. In the screenshot, I had supposedly sent him a message. Your mother is dead, and you still don't deserve Willow. The fake was crude, but the emotion was enough. The forum blew up again. Someone edited my photo into a black and white memorial portrait and posted it online just to curse me. After David saw it, he was so angry he actually laughed. People believe this. I said, of course they do. People only believe what gives them an excuse to attack. When Willow came to find me, she was holding the screenshot in her hand, her face ashen. She asked, Did you send this? I leaned against the edge of the basketball court. Sweat slid down my neck, my sneakers pressed against the rubber ground, and heat steamed up from the surface. I wiped my hands with a towel and asked, Do you want it to be true? Her eyes trembled. I don't know. I nodded. Then let's just say it is. Her breath caught. I threw the towel into my bag and walked away. She chased after me and explained, George, that's not what I meant. I stopped and turned to look at her. Willow, you've already believed him once. She tightened her grip on the screenshot. But that sentence is too vicious. So you think I'm capable of saying it? Her lips moved. I smiled. Fine. Her face turned even paler. Don't smile like that. What else should I do? Cry for you? I kept walking forward, and she followed me. The hallway smelled of freshly mopped floors, and our shoes made squeaking sounds against the damp surface. I took her to the school's network center. David was already waiting there. Beside him stood the counselor and a teacher from the IT department. Willow froze. I handed my phone to the teacher. Please help us with this. The teacher pulled up the back-end login records, then opened image forensic software. The screen showed signs of the screenshot being spliced together. The timestamps were misaligned, and there were compression artifacts around the edge of the profile picture. The counselor frowned. This image is fake. The paper in Willow's hand slipped to the floor. I didn't look at her. I only asked the teacher, what about the posting account? The teacher pointed at the screen. Same dorm network. The login device was Makoto's computer. A sound came from the doorway. Makoto stood there, the expression on his face not yet tucked away. Behind him were two classmates. They had probably come to watch me get exposed. Now, all of them were frozen at the door. The counselor said in a deep voice, Makoto, explain this. Makoto's eyes reddened quickly. Teacher, someone else used my computer. I didn't know. I smiled. Don't rush. I took out a printed document and handed it to the counselor. This is notarized evidence preservation done by my lawyer. Last night, that same account uploaded an audio clip. The IP address, device fingerprint, and browser cache are all in here. Every bit of color drained from Makoto's face. Willow looked at him and asked, It really was you? Makoto shook his head and argued, No, Willow, believe me, Martin used my computer to post it. He said he couldn't stand George, and I couldn't stop him. Martin, who was standing behind him, turned green. Makoto, don't talk nonsense. Makoto turned and shouted, if it wasn't you, then who was it? You were the one who said yesterday that you wanted to help me get even. Martin grabbed him by the collar and demanded, you were the one who asked me to bump the thread for you, and now you're dumping it on me. The two of them started pulling at each other. A chair was knocked over, and its metal legs scraped against the floor, the sound piercing enough to hurt the ears. The counselor slammed the table. Enough. Willow stood where she was, her fingers trembling. I walked over, picked up the fake screenshot she had dropped on the floor, and stuffed it back into her hand. Keep it. She looked up, her eyes full of panic. I said, this is the second time you chose him. She tried to grab my sleeve. I stepped aside and avoided her hand. Her hand stopped in midair, then slowly fell back down. Chapter 9. The school gave Makoto a disciplinary warning, issued a public criticism against Martin, and locked the forum thread before deleting the images. But I had no intention of stopping, because I still hadn't dug out the real reason Makoto had registered that marriage. I had my lawyer investigate the assistance application process and discovered that Makoto had submitted a spousal joint hardship certificate. In it, he claimed that Willow had no fixed income, that her family refused to provide support, and that both husband and wife were deeply in debt. When Willow saw the document, her face turned livid. I never signed this. I pointed at the signature line. The handwriting imitation is pretty good. She picked up the paper, her fingertips lingering on her own name for a long time. He used my identity to apply for money. Not just that. I turned to the next page. He also applied for the Alumni Charity Fund. His reason was that his newlywed wife was being harassed by her wealthy boyfriend, and the mental stress made her unable to work part-time. Willow closed her eyes. I smiled. You're pretty busy in his story. You have to be his wife, a poor victim, and my victim all at once. She didn't laugh. Over the past few days, it was as if a layer had been stripped off her. In the past, whenever she looked at Makoto, there was always a kind of condescending pity in her eyes. Now that pity had shattered, and underneath it was humiliation. Watching her feel humiliated put me in a good mood. She asked, when did you start investigating him? The day you registered your marriage. She looked up. So that night, when you asked me to tell you everything he'd ever said, it was so you could investigate him. What else would it be? Her throat moved slightly. I thought you still cared about me. I closed the file and looked at her with a smile. Willow, a person can't have everything. Her eyes reddened, and her fingers gripped the edge of the table. George, is there really no way back for us? I asked in return, does your husband know you're asking me that? She trembled as if the words had stabbed her. Her phone rang. It was Willow's father. She answered, and after only a couple of sentences, her expression grew even worse. I heard the suppressed anger on the other end of the call. Come home immediately. Your marriage record with Makoto has already affected the partnership review. The Wang family has paused the contract signing. Explain this to the board yourself. After the call ended, Willow could barely stand. I reached out and supported her for a moment. She looked up at me, and a sudden glimmer of hope appeared in her eyes. I let go. Her hand caught nothing. I said, don't misunderstand. The carpet is expensive. If you fall and ruin it, you can't afford to pay for it. The light in her eyes went out. That night, Makoto came looking for me. He stood downstairs outside my apartment building, drenched by the rain. His hair clung to his forehead, and he was clutching the disciplinary notice in his hand. George, are you satisfied now? Holding an umbrella, I walked up to him and replied, somewhat. He gritted his teeth. You have money and power. Destroying me is easy for you. Cut the victim act. I tilted the umbrella closer to my side, and rainwater streamed down the edge, splashing onto his shoulder. You forged signatures, committed assistance fraud, and spread rumors. Not a single one of those things was done by me for you. His eyes turned vicious. I was just trying to survive. You wanted to survive. So everyone else was supposed to become your stepping stone. He clenched his fists, about to swing at me. Then he saw the surveillance camera behind me, and his hand froze in midair. I smiled, still clear-headed enough not to be stupid, and hit me. His face twisted. I leaned closer to him and lowered my voice. Makoto, didn't you want to be a husband? I saved you a seat at the Liu family board meeting tomorrow. His pupils shrank. Then I added, go play the role properly. Chapter 10. The Liu family board meeting was held in the top-floor conference room. The long table had been polished until it shone. Steam rose from the cups of tea, and the projector on the wall buzzed softly. Willow Liu sat on the right side. She wasn't wearing any makeup, and the bracelet was still on her wrist. When Makoto was brought in by security, his clothes were wrinkled, and the shadows under his eyes were dark. The moment he saw the room full of people, his steps clearly faltered. Willow's father slammed the table and asked, so you're Makoto? Makoto lowered his head and said, Uncle, Willow and I only did this to save my mother. Willow's father sneered. Who are you calling uncle? According to the documents, you should be calling me dad. Someone in the conference room coughed. Makoto's face flushed red. Willow said quietly, Dad. Willow's father turned to her and snapped. Shut up. I sat across from them, slowly flipping through the documents. Willow's father looked at me and asked, George, what does the Wong family say? I pushed the file over and said, the partnership is suspended, the engagement is cancelled, and any follow-up compensation will be discussed according to the contract terms. Willow suddenly looked up and shouted, George Wong. I looked at her. What? Her lips trembled slightly as she asked, are you really cancelling the engagement? I smiled. You're already married. What am I supposed to get engaged to? Someone else's wife? Her face turned terrifyingly pale. Makoto suddenly spoke. George, aren't you just trying to force Willow to come back to you? She already knows she was wrong. Why drag the partnership between the two families into this? I looked at him, and the smile on my face deepened. You're negotiating benefits for her now? He forced himself to say, I'm her husband. Of course I have the right. Good. I pushed another document in front of him. Since you admit you're her husband, sign these. Makoto lowered his head to look, and his expression slowly changed. The first item confirmed the ownership of debts incurred during his marriage with Willow. The second item confirmed the medical expense loan for his mother, totaling $376,000. The third item confirmed that he alone would bear the legal responsibility for forging Willow's signature to apply for assistance. The fourth item required him to cooperate with the Liu family in issuing a statement regarding reputational damage. Makoto's fingers trembled. I can't sign this. I raised an eyebrow. A husband doesn't have the right to sign. He gritted his teeth. That's not the same thing. Willow's father stood up and slammed his palm on the table. Then what is the same thing? When you used my daughter's identity to apply for money, why didn't you say it wasn't the same thing? Makoto panicked. I didn't mean any harm. I only borrowed it for a while. Willow's father laughed in anger. Borrowed a marriage. Borrowed a signature. Borrowed my daughter's reputation. Are you borrowing things? Or skinning her alive? Makoto's tears fell. My mother was sick. I really had no choice. I placed a bank statement under the projector. On the screen, the refunded medical payment of $120,000 appeared clearly. Half had been transferred into an online loan account, and the other half had been sent to someone named Maria. The conference room went silent. Willow stared at that name and asked, Who is Maria? Makoto's lips trembled. Just an ordinary friend. I tapped to the next page. The photo popped up. Makoto and Maria were holding hands at the entrance of a mall, and Maria was carrying the latest designer bag. Willow's bracelet knocked against the side of the glass with a sharp clink. Her voice sounded dry as she asked, Is this the debt you were talking about? Makoto lunged forward to turn off the projector, but the security guards pinned him down. He shouted, She lent me that. I was just paying her back. I smiled. How thoughtful of you. Willow stood up. The chair tipped backward and crashed to the floor. Makoto, did you register your marriage with me to save your mother? Or did you do it so you could use my status and my money to support another woman? Makoto shook his head through tears. No, Willow, listen to me. I broke up with her a long time ago. I played the recording on my phone. Maria's voice came through the speakers. Didn't you say Willow's family was rich, and that after you registered your marriage with her, she'd pave the way for you? When are you going to divorce her? Makoto's voice followed right after. Once she gets the aid approved, and once I squeeze another payout out of George, I'll divorce her. Willow swayed on her feet. I didn't help her. She grabbed the corner of the table, her nails scraping across the wood. Makoto collapsed to the floor, muttering, It's not like that. It's not. I walked over to him, crouched down, and placed that marriage certificate in his hand. Hold on to it. He looked up, his face covered in tears. I smiled and said, You won. She's your wife. Chapter 11. Willow threw up on the spot. She rushed into the restroom. The door wasn't fully closed, and the sound of dry heaving came from inside, mixed with the rushing water from the faucet. I stood in the hallway and didn't go in. Willow's father glanced at me. Some of the anger on his face eased. George, the Liu family owes you an apology for this, I said. Let's talk compensation. He nodded and didn't plead for his daughter. Adults broke contracts. Adults talked with money, paid debts with consequences. Good. Makoto was escorted out of the conference room by security. His whole body slumped against the wall, and he was still clutching the marriage certificate in his hand. When he saw me, he crawled up and grabbed the leg of my pants. George, I was wrong. I'll pay the money back. Tell the Liu family not to sue me. I lowered my head and looked at him. Pay the money back to me. He froze. You owe Willow, not me. He immediately turned toward the restroom and shouted, Willow, Willow, save me. My mom can't be without me. Willow came out while holding onto the doorframe. Her face was ashen, and her lips were wet with water. She looked at Makoto, and there was nothing left in her eyes but disgust. Makoto crawled toward her and begged, Willow, We'll get divorced. I'll do it right away. Just don't hold me accountable. Okay. I laughed. Now you want a divorce? He clutched the marriage certificate, his fingers trembling nonstop. I don't want it anymore. I really don't want it anymore. No. He froze. I crouched down and looked into his eyes. This piece of paper isn't something you can take when you want it and throw away when you're done. His teeth chattered as he asked, "What do you want?" "Follow the legal process." Willow spoke, her voice so hoarse it grated against the ears. "For forging my signature, defrauding assistance funds, and maliciously spreading rumors, I will call the police, and I will sue." Makoto looked up at her as if he were seeing her for the first time. "Willow, you can't do this. My mom is still sick." Willow's shoulders trembled, but she didn't back down. "Your mother's illness is real, but it's also true that you used her as a weapon." Makoto's eyes changed at once. He suddenly lunged forward and grabbed the hem of her skirt. Willow stepped back, but she lost her balance. I reached out, pulled her back, and drew her behind me. Makoto missed and slammed his forehead into the corner of the wall with a dull thud. Blood immediately seeped out from his brow bone. He covered his forehead and sat on the floor, letting out broken, quiet sobs. Security stepped forward and pinned him down. He struggled and shouted, "George, this is all your fault. If you hadn't investigated me, I wouldn't have ended up like this." I looked at the blood on his forehead as it ran down his face and dripped onto the cover of the marriage certificate. "Makoto, you really should thank me." He panted heavily. I said, "The most respectable thing you'll ever have in this life is this certificate." He broke down completely. He grabbed the marriage certificate and smashed it onto the floor, then threw himself forward to pick it back up. Over and over, he muttered, "Divorce. I want a divorce. I don't want it anymore." Everyone in the hallway was watching him. Martin, who had once spoken up for him, stood by the elevator with his head lowered, not daring to come over. Willow watched the scene, her body growing stiffer and stiffer. I let go of her. She turned back to look at me, tears falling hard. "George, I know I have no right to beg you, but I really know I was wrong." I smiled faintly and said, "You really don't have that right." She reached out as if to grab my sleeve, but her hand stopped in midair before slowly falling back down. I turned and went back into the conference room to continue discussing compensation. Before the door closed, I heard her crying in the hallway. She kept her voice very low, the sound broken and uneven. I didn't look back. Chapter 12. Makoto's punishment was upgraded. The forged signature and fake documents involved fraudulent assistance claims. The school cooperated with the investigation. The charity fund recovered the money, and the hospital also submitted a statement explaining the situation. He wasn't sentenced to some world-ending punishment. Reality wasn't a stage play. Each charge had to be verified, and every piece of evidence had to go through the proper process. But for someone like Makoto, it was enough. He was suspended from school. His debt entered civil litigation. His reputation rotted away on campus. Maria sold their chat records to a forum blogger, then blocked him. On the day Makoto's mother was discharged, she slapped him in front of the hospital. I saw it from inside the car. She cursed. "You said the Liu family would give us money. You said the Wang family wouldn't dare make a fuss. Now the money is gone, and the debt collectors are watching the house too. You've ruined me." The wound on Makoto's forehead was still covered with gauze. The slap knocked his face to the side. He didn't hit back. He just stood there, his eyes terrifyingly empty. The debt collectors didn't stage some dramatic street chase. They simply sued according to procedure, froze accounts, and collected lawful debts. But Makoto couldn't take it. He used to get sympathy by crying. He used to gain resources by kneeling. Now, everyone was making him sign papers, repay money, and take responsibility. That hurt worse than beating him. When Willow came to find me, I was packing up my apartment. She stood at the door, holding a box in her arms. Inside were the bracelet, the ring, the scarf I had given her, and the wedding planning booklet she had flipped through so many times it had grown worn. She said, "I'm returning these to you." I glanced at it and said, "Throw it away." Her fingertips trembled. "You don't even want to look at them. They're dirty." Her tears fell at once. I walked around her and continued packing. She followed me inside, her voice shaking. "George, I've already filed for divorce for Makoto. An annulment may not work, and the lawyer said we can only go through the divorce process. I'll clean up everything." I placed a book into a box and asked, "Why are you telling me this?" Her breathing grew uneven. "I want to start over." I stopped and looked at her. For a second, her eyes lit up, but that light was quickly extinguished by my smile. "Willow, if you want to start over, go find your husband, your lawyer, or a therapist. Don't come to me." The last trace of color drained from her face. "At the time, I really only wanted to save someone. You saved someone by sacrificing me." She shook her head. "No, it doesn't matter whether you did or not." I picked up the wedding planning booklet and turned to the last page. Her handwriting was there. "George, please take care of me for the rest of our lives." I looked at it for 2 seconds, tore the page out, and threw it into the trash can. Willow rushed over, wanting to pick it up. I pressed down on the lid of the trash can. She looked up at me, tears hanging from her chin. I said, "Don't pick it up, your hands will get dirty." She knelt on the carpet, her shoulders trembling, and a sob forced its way out of her throat. I walked around her and carried the last box out the door. When the elevator doors closed, she was still sitting there, holding that box in her arms, staring at the trash can as if someone had pulled all the bones out of her body. I pressed the button for the first floor. The elevator descended, the numbers changing one floor at a time. There wasn't a trace of softness in my heart. Only one thing felt satisfying. She finally knew that paper could cut. Chapter 13. On the day of the divorce hearing, I had no intention of going. Willow sent me a lot of messages, but I didn't reply to a single one. In the end, David sent me a video. At the courthouse entrance, Makoto was wearing a wrinkled coat. The gauze on his forehead had been removed, leaving behind a faint scar. He stopped Willow, clutching a photocopy of the marriage certificate in his hand, crying so hard his features twisted together. "Willow, let's not get divorced. I was wrong. From now on, I'll listen to everything you say." Willow stepped back and said, "Move. My mom still needs money. I've been suspended from school now, and I can't find a good job. You can't just abandon me." She looked at him and asked, "On what grounds am I supposed to take care of you?" Makoto froze. "I'm your husband." Willow laughed once, but her smile looked worse than crying. "So you finally remember." The lawyer beside her signaled the security guards. Makoto suddenly dropped to his knees and hugged her leg. "I don't want to pay compensation. I don't want to go to jail. I'm begging you. Withdraw the lawsuit. I'll pay back the assistant's money slowly. Don't force me." Willow lowered her head and looked at him, her fingers gripping the strap of her bag tightly. I thought she was about to relapse into that old savior complex again, but in the video, she lifted her foot and kicked his hands away. "Makoto, I saved you once, and I almost ruined myself in the process." Her voice was hoarse, but it didn't tremble. "From now on, whether you live or die has nothing to do with me." Makoto collapsed onto the ground and started shouting incoherently. He shouted that she had no conscience, that George had ruined him, that his life was miserable. The security guards dragged him away. One of his shoes fell off, and the bottom of his sock scraped against the ground, turning gray and black. He reached for the fallen photocopy. The paper had been stepped on, leaving shoe prints behind. He grabbed it, pressed it against his chest, and muttered, "I'm her husband. I'm her husband." David sent another message. "This guy has completely lost it." I replied, "Serves him right." That night, Willow came to my new place. I didn't know how she had found the address. The doorbell rang 3 times before I opened the door. She stood outside without an umbrella, her hair soaked through, rainwater dripping down her chin. She said, "George, we still have to wait for the divorce judgment, but the court has already accepted the case. I'll repay all the losses your family suffered." I leaned against the doorframe and asked, "And then?" She looked up and said, "And then I wanted to apologize to you in person." "Go ahead." She clenched her hands and said, "I'm sorry." I nodded. "I heard you." Then I prepared to close the door. She hurriedly reached out to stop it. The edge of the door caught her fingers, and she sucked in a breath from the pain, but she didn't pull her hand back. "George, I really know I was wrong." I lowered my eyes and looked at her pale fingers. In the past, if that hand had gotten even the tiniest cut, I would have driven halfway across the city to buy medicine for her. Now, I only felt that her hand was in the way. I pulled the door open slightly. Hope had just appeared in her eyes when I picked up my phone and called property management right in front of her. "There's someone upstairs harassing a resident. Please come handle it." She froze. "George, do you really have to be this cruel?" I smiled. "Don't you love talking about empathy? Go talk to property management." Her tears mixed with the rain as they rolled down her face. "Did you never love me?" I looked at her and seriously thought about it. I had loved her. I had wanted to marry her. I had also lowered my pride for her. But saying any of that would only make her think there was still something she could hold on to. So I said, "I forgot." Her whole body swayed. When the property management staff came up, she was still standing at the door, her lips pale and her fingers hanging limply at her sides. The staff asked her to leave. She didn't make a scene. She only asked me before turning away, "Are we really over?" I said, "No." She whipped her head back. I smiled and finished the sentence. It ended a long time ago. The elevator doors closed, cutting her face away piece by piece. I shut the door. Inside the apartment, only the sound of rain remained. On the coffee table lay a new cooperation contract. The Wang family had already chosen a new partner, and the compensation plan with the Liu family had also been settled. My phone vibrated. David had sent me Makoto's latest update. Because he refused to cooperate with repayment, he had been restricted from high-end spending. Maria sued him for failing to repay her loan. His school disciplinary record followed him into his file. After Makoto's mother was discharged from the hospital, she returned to her hometown and blamed all the debts on him. In the video, he was sitting at the entrance of a rented room, his hair a mess, clutching that worn marriage certificate in his hand. Whenever he saw someone, He explained that he wasn't a scammer. No one stopped to listen. I closed the video. Outside the window, the rain had stopped. The streetlights shone on the wet ground, bright enough to sting the eyes. I replied to David with one sentence. Pretty entertaining. Then I deleted Willow's number, Makoto's number, and every old photo, all at once. When the trash icon popped up, I tapped confirm. The screen went empty. I picked up my glass and took a sip. The ice water slid down my throat, clean and sharp.